Greetings, 8th grade class. This is Thursday, the 8th of January, and by now we're into Chapter 7 in the textbook in Section 1. And as you'll see on the timeline, which is on page 209, we're entering the period of revolutions, starting with the French and Indian Wars, which started with a skirmish in Pennsylvania, which quickly spread to the south and encompassed the Louisiana territory, which was governed by the French at that time. And the Indians were basically allied with the British at this time, so there was always going to be some conflict there. And not too long afterwards, the French were defeated in that war, but just before the French was supposed to surrender that territory, the Louisiana territory, there was a little secret backroom deal between the King of France and the King of Spain, which involved the transfer of the Louisiana territory from France to Spain, you know, just trying to pull a little number on the British there. So, with that in mind, we're going to take a look at this video, which also shows us the first stages of the Acadians are coming to us from their original home in Nova Scotia, and we'll see that in more detail now as we have a look at the French and Indian Wars and end off with the Cajuns.
Neglected by the mother country for some 60 years, Louisiana had waited in the wings to play her part in history. Then, in the middle of the 18th century, she was thrust onto the stage of world events. In 1754, fighting broke out in the backwoods of Pennsylvania. Anglo-American settlers and soldiers were spilling westward over the Appalachian Mountains into French and Indian lands. Leading the British forces was an inexperienced young officer from Virginia named George Washington. That small skirmish sparked the French and Indian War. The conflict soon engulfed Canada, the West Indies, and Europe, reaching as far as India. A truly world war. When it was over, France had lost everything. A British flag now flew over most of her once vast empire in the New World. But before England could take control of the Mississippi River, Louis XV secretly handed over Louisiana to his cousin, the King of Spain.
Spain suddenly finds herself with this whole colony. She cedes her Florida territories. The Isle of Orleans is all she has left on the East Bank at the end of the French and Indian War. And she takes over all of Louisiana, all of the West Bank of the Mississippi. And France is out of the New World.
The trouble was, there weren't any Spaniards. In New Orleans, French Captain Charles Aubry was ordered to hand over control of the colony when the Spanish arrived. He waited and waited. But instead of the boatloads of Spanish immigrants he expected, Captain Aubry found himself welcoming the first families in a huge new wave of French settlers, the Acadians.
Louisiana basically remained French, and it remained French because of that tremendous influx of the Acadians that came in from 1765 to 1785. 6,000, which was a lot. That was a big percentage.
The Acadians, or Cajuns as they're often called today, were French Catholic families who made their home in Acadie, what is now Nova Scotia. These were families like the Broussards, the Thibodeaux, and the Arsenaults. For a century and a half, they lived there peacefully with the Indians, building a prosperous society, a distinct culture, and a fierce sense of independence. But Anglo-Americans in New England had cast an envious eye upon their Acadian neighbors to the north.
They had the wealth, basically. They were the dominant cultural population group in the area. much to the chagrin of the British. And you began to get a constant drumbeat to do something about it, to somehow expropriate this rich farmland and this wealth and give it to Protestants. There were a group of wealthy merchants and fleet owners in Massachusetts, real estate developers who wanted to get their hand on Nova Scotia. But you had to get rid of the Acadians first. And so they used this religious bigotry as one of the ploys to stimulate eventually what would become le Grand Dérangement, the forcible exile of the Acadians from their homeland.
But the British officials sought to do far worse than simply take the Acadians' homeland from them.
When they exiled the Acadians in 1755, they meant to break up that society into small enough pieces and integrate those small pieces into existing English settlements so that there would be no more longer a society that would call themselves Acadians.
Ethnic cleansing. That's essentially what was happening. They were cleansing that area of an ethnic group, that is, the Acadians.
As much as half the entire population died during the exile. They wandered throughout the world, seeking lost family members and searching for a new homeland. Then at the end of the French and Indian War, some of them came here, to Louisiana.
They fell in love with the place immediately. These beautiful oak trees and obviously very rich soil, waterways, fishing, swamps, marshes, prairies, and the thing they wanted most of all, isolation. It would give them a chance to rebuild their own and save their own culture.
The point of coming to Louisiana for the Acadians was to regroup. They referred to Louisiana as La Nouvelle Acadie, New Acadia.